speak a few words in English to reinforce what I just said in Sinhala. Now, as was earlier mentioned, most of my career has been overseas. Of course, I treasure the moments I spent in the central bank in the 1980s and early 90s, because that was a very formative period, not just for me personally, but for the whole country. As you know, 1983, the year I joined the central bank, was the year when we had very violent events in this country, and we have come through that, and now that is hopefully over, and the country is now turning over a new leaf. So I'm happy that I'm able to come here and make a contribution, but I want to make one very simple point. We have to all work together. The governor himself can't take the whole institution and lift it up and make a contribution to Sri Lankan society. It has to come from each and every one of you. And my endeavor really is to try and bring all of you together and make us as productive as possible in terms of reinforcing our position as the thought leader, not just for the government, but for the whole of Sri Lankan society, given that we have significant advantages in this institution that we can use to our advantage as well as the country's advantage. This is something that I want all of you to remember. But also, along with those advantages that you all possess, you find that there are certain obligations and responsibilities on each of you. Remember, each of you is a role model for the rest of society. In your day-to-day work, not just in the bank, but even when you go home, people are looking at each of you as a role model. They look up to you. You all are the leaders in this country in terms of intellectual ability as well as your ability to influence events and policy. This is something you must always remember. We have to create that example. We have to be always conscious of the fact that there is upon us a huge responsibility that we have to keep. Now, in terms of the current events in the country and the global economy, I'll just give you a few comments on my perspective. We have seen over the last 10 to 20 years a big transformation in the way the world operates. When I joined the central bank, we considered the United States, Europe, Japan to some extent as the big developed countries, and other countries around the world were mostly developing countries or perhaps poor in some way or another. And those days, we used to deal a lot with the World Bank and the IMF because we were considered less developed countries, and those institutions used to funnel aid to us because we were considered poor. Now that has all changed. What has happened since the early 2000s is that the so-called poor countries today actually have bigger financial reserves than all the Western countries. If you look at the likes of China, Brazil, Russia, and India, they have more financial reserves than does the United States or any of the European countries or Japan. That is a huge change in the way the world economy operates. It has huge implications for the way we conduct our own policies in this country, because it means that we are no longer able to just depend on these aid agencies to help us develop the country. We have to now show the rest of the world, particularly the financial markets, which all of you are conversant with, that we mean business, that we conduct our business properly, and that we do it in an efficient way, which will give investors in the Sri Lankan economy efficient returns and a decent future prospect for the way their investments perform. This is very important to understand, because the way we do our business has also changed in that period. As I said earlier, we used to spend most of our time negotiating with the IMF, trying to get loans with the World Bank, and that was the only method we had for developing this country. We would also go to individual countries like Japan and the European countries and the United States and get a little bit of aid. But that was the game at that time. From about 2000 onwards, that whole story has changed, and now we are dealing with the markets. We can raise capital in the capital markets, and dealing with the capital markets is a completely different skill set from what we have been used to in dealing with the multilateral institutions. Dealing with markets, as I said, is very important. Now, last week, I saw an article in the newspapers, in the Daily Mirror, which said that somebody in the central bank had made a comment that our reserves had fallen. We were drawing from our reserves to fund the repayment of a bond. Now, this is the sort of comment which really damages our institution and damages the Sri Lankan economy. It shows vulnerability. Remember that. See, we can't afford to show our vulnerability because really we are not vulnerable. We are a very strong economy. Our job, all of us, is to really gather our resources and make this economy even stronger. So be very careful, is my message to you, whenever you deal with the press and when you deal with outsiders in terms of how you convey the messages. I don't want you to lie or to create an unnecessary illusion, but on the other hand, I want you to think responsibly and remember you have a huge responsibility because it is your words that carry all that weight when it comes to how the rest of the world, particularly the financial markets, view the central bank and view Sri Lanka. And this is something that we really have to keep in mind as we go forward. So in terms of how the bank works, I think I've just expressed it in Sinhala. We have certain very important messages that were originally espoused by Mr. John Exter. I would urge all of you to go and read that original report that John Exter wrote way back in the 1950s when he set up the central bank, because they are still relevant today in terms of the responsibility of our officers towards the government, the agency functions that we conduct for the government. For instance, public debt is more or less in our control in the central bank. It's something that usually isn't a central bank function. This is a huge responsibility we have, and such like exchange control, etc., which the government has asked us to carry on their behalf. These are very important functions, and they were set up in that manner because we were a small commodity exporting economy at that stage. Now we are trying to industrialize, and we want to grow our services sector. We have to bring in a whole new set of skills. We have to look at the broader economy and really engage with the rest of the world in order to see that our economy grows from strength to strength. So with those few words, my conclusion is the world is very challenging. As I said earlier, the global economic crisis in 2008 created a lot of dangers for us, but at the same time it also created opportunities. Right? So on the one hand, you find that the financial markets are very volatile. You've probably heard that the stock market at the moment, lots of foreigners are selling their shares in Sri Lanka. That may or may not be a bad thing. Markets go up and down. And when they go down, people see opportunities and they come in and buy. So I'm not worried about those short-term volatility that affects markets. But we must think of the longer term. How can we use the stock market, the bond markets, our monetary policy to develop Sri Lanka in the best form possible? We have to prevent inflation. Remember, our key objectives are to maintain price stability and also to maintain financial stability. These are two very essential factors. They affect everybody in this country. Why? Because people save their money, whether they keep it in their pillows or under the bed or in a bank. The fact of the matter is, those are their life savings, their precious savings, and we have to ensure, we have a responsibility to ensure that the value of those savings does not get eroded by inflation and wasteful practices and monetary policy that really does not work. So those are the hard choices that we have to make in the days and months to come. As you know, the new government has made several promises to the people of this country. That is reflecting the fact that real wages and incomes have deteriorated over time. But at the same time, we have to, as advisors to the government, make sure that the government does that in a responsible manner, and by making the necessary monetary policy changes, hopefully we can ensure that we don't get into difficult inflationary circumstances or imbalances in our external accounts. So I hope to meet each of you individually over the months to come. Please give me some time. We're very busy at the moment doing the budget. There's a mini budget coming on the 29th of January. I've been sitting with the finance minister for the last 3 or 4 days working on that. I must say that I've been very impressed by the staff in the central bank who come to assist me in that endeavor. But going forward, I think we really have to start re-examining what we do and try and make the bank's contribution to the government and the economy perhaps a little less controversial and much more productive. And I hope I can enlist all of your support to achieve that noble objective. Thank you very much for welcoming me so warmly. I wish you all the very best for the new year. It's, I think, going to be a very interesting year for us ahead. but I'm sure that it will be full of prosperity and happiness for all of you. Thank you very much.